Great to have you with us. Joining us now, Senator Tim Kaine. Of course, you know he ran for vice president with Hillary Clinton in 2016, and the senator also up for re-election to a second term that'll be decided on November 8th. He's running against Republican nominee Corey Stewart. Tim Kaine, an overwhelming favorite, better than Secretariat odds. I've got him 1-20. Basically, if you bet $1, you can win like a penny back. I mean, he's going to win this race. That's my narrative. And now I got to segue because he's in the Capitol, so we can't talk politics, but we can talk policy. Senator, great to have you with us.
John, it's good to be back with you, man. Thanks. I should have come over to Eastern Market. My tiny postage stamp studio is right near there.
We should meet there someday. I love the Eastern Market area. I know it's gone through a lot of changes, but it's very convenient, and I'm right by the metro, so it all works out. Let's get to the Trump-Putin Helsinki summit. Give us your raw take.
Well, the summit was at the end of what I thought was a really bad week for the president because he went over and jousted with our allies, trashed Theresa May basically in her front living room and did the same to Angela Merkel and said Europe was our foe. But then when he had the chance to stand up against the leader, the head of our Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, said as our chief adversary as a country, he got all soft and said he preferred Vladimir Putin's version of reality than his own intelligence community, the hardworking American men and women who have reached the unanimous conclusion that Putin and Russia attacked the election in 2016. Now, since he's come back, he said, no, I said would when I meant wouldn't. So he did a reverse field the next day. Then he went back on the pro-Putin side. Then last night on CBS, he kind of came back and had it dragged out of him that he believed the intelligence community, but he really had to have it dragged out of him that he blamed Vladimir Putin for the election hacking, even though a front-page article in the New York Times this morning shows that he was given all the briefing about Vladimir Putin's direct ordering of this 3 weeks before he was inaugurated. So here's a president who's been very willing to, when he talks about the election and any hacking, to blame President Obama for it, but he had to have it dragged out of him that Vladimir Putin was responsible. And there's something highly suspicious about it, John, and that's one of the reasons why we've got to protect the Mueller investigation, which, with the indictments of 12 Russians last week and another Russian this week, is picking up steam. We got to protect it and let it get to its endpoint so we can figure out what's going on.
So, Senator, when you said there's something suspicious about it, elaborate on that.
Well, I'm not going to jump to the conclusion before the investigation is done. It's just that why would the president, when he's given all this information from his own, these are hardworking, patriotic Americans who work in the intelligence community. I travel around the world as a member of the Armed Services Committee to visit with our troops in action, but it's not just our troops deployed overseas that are keeping us safe, especially in these days of an ISIS that's defeated on the battleground but wants to inspire attacks here and there. The way you stop those attacks is less with a battalion than with intelligence professionals who share information with allies. And so when he won't accept the combined judgment of these intelligence professionals, most of whom are Republicans, and continues to demean them, call their efforts a witch hunt or say that it's rigged, but then, you just fold like, limp spaghetti next to Vladimir Putin, it's just suspicious. Now, we'll see what the reason for all of that is. Maybe it's just horrible judgment. That's why this investigation is so important.
If people had questioned the integrity of the U.S. intel on WMDs in Iraq before we went in with the invasion, which has cost, as you know, tens of thousands of lives, limbs, and a lot of money, and basically disrupted the entire area. I mean, if we had questioned some intel back then, wouldn't we be a lot better off, Senator, than we are now?
John, that's a really good point, and people did question it back in 2002 and 2003
because it was completely false. It was completely false.
President Bush, hey, look, they have weapons of mass destruction, but the IAEA was saying no, they don't. That there was a vigorous debate about it, and I don't think there's problems having a debate. But in this instance, it's less questioning as an obstinate refusal to accept what is an established fact. I mean, this every agency we have. And John, I'll give you an example. Being on the Armed Services Committee, I often hear a different take on how are things going in Afghanistan from the Armed Services, from the DoD folks, from the Intel folks, from the State Department folks. So you can get differences of opinion, on all kinds of issues, and that's helpful. But here there is basically a unanimity of opinion after years of research by all of the agencies. When you have Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, Republican senator, former Republican senator, former ambassador to Germany, standing up and saying this along with everybody else, what the president is showing is not a questioning of intelligence, which can be healthy. I agree with you on that. He's showing an obstinate refusal to accept a fact. And there's some reason why he's so obstinate. And maybe it's just that he doesn't want to undermine, the narrative of his own election. There may be other reasons, but that's why we need to get to the bottom of it.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, trucking the truth across America, live from Washington, D.C. We're with Democratic Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine. By the way, he's up for re-election to a second term on November 6th. Senator, I think we're all in agreement that it's a good thing for adversaries to have conversations, right?
We have to. Got to listen. Got to listen to each other.
Especially when the two entities meeting control 91% of the entire world's nuclear arsenal. So let me just ask you this straight out: had you been there, if you were president, how would you have handled that press conference, knowing that you're trying to establish a new platform of dialogue to get some of these things resolved, whether it be Syria, Ukraine, Crimea, pipelines, etc.? How would you have handled it?
John, you are right. I mean, look, we've always been able to have conversations with adversaries, JFK and Khrushchev, and during the thick of the Cold War, but it didn't stop us from standing up against them when they were putting missiles into Cuba. And so you've got to have conversations with adversaries. I don't think I would have done the summit with Putin. I certainly wouldn't have gone over and picked fight with all of our European allies and called Europe a foe, and then stood up next to Putin and basically said, I believe him over our American intelligence community. I think what we would have done and what we should be doing is certainly at the level of Secretary of State, Secretary Pompeo to Foreign Minister Lavrov, having discussions, especially about Syria. There's a lot of areas where U.S. and Russian policy are in direct conflict. I don't think we should be saying, hey, that's fine, you annexed Crimea, violating sovereignty, violating international law, we'll give you that one. I don't think we should be saying that. But we do both, U.S. and Syria and the world, have an interest, U.S. and Russian have an interest in finding some stability in Syria. So at the Secretary of State, Foreign Minister level, or if it's together at a meeting of international nations where we're there together to have a conversation about something specific, like Syria, I think that's appropriate. But look, we gave the president the power months ago by 98-2 vote in the Senate to impose additional sanctions against Russia for their hacking of an American election. When you have the Senate vote 98-2 to do that, that means the Republican senators accept the intel that Russia attacked us. The White House hasn't really used those sanctions in an effective way, and so I wish we had put those sanctions in place right away. We would then be having a discussion about, extradite those indicted to the United States, and we can talk about reducing the sanctions. But you are right. On issues like Syria, the need to find a next chapter there that promotes more stability, we do have to talk to Russia about that. And there's some other issues as well.
So let's go to NATO. The president's big issue there with the summit with NATO was like, look, there's 27 countries in it. 21 of them are not paying the 2% that everybody shook hands on.
Yep.
And especially with Berlin, I mean, to the layman, here's what he basically said. You're paying 1.1% of your GDP to defense. We have 21 bases in Germany. We have 35,000 military personnel in Germany protecting you against who? Russia. And now you're getting a second pipeline, which is fine. That's your business. You want to get a second pipeline for liquefied natural gas. You're going to be paying them billions of dollars for the gas. That's fine. But then pay your own defense. I mean, is that not a logical thing for the president to say? Well, I mean, 7 countries are paying it. Why shouldn't the others pony up and pay what they said they'd pay? And Obama said the same thing.
If that's what he had said, only that, There's no problem with asking NATO to pay more. NATO nations are supposed to reach a percentage of their GDP. I think their obligation is to do that by 2024. So they're not. It's not like they're in arrears. I think they're. Are they on a flight path to get to what they're supposed to be doing? And of course, the president should do that. And we have to grapple with, does it make sense to have, this number of troops or that number of bases in Europe? We ought to be doing that all the time. There's no problem with doing that. But to go over and give an interview to a British newspaper and trash Theresa May for the way she handled Brexit, to make negative statements about Angela Merkel, to say that Europe is a foe. I mean, God, John, when I travel to visit American troops in Afghanistan or in northern Iraq, I see these European nations and Canadian troops side by side with our troops. If I go to the Landstuhl Military Hospital in Germany, I see not only U.S. troops recovering there, I see these Allied troops in beds or in rooms right next to them recovering. So when you have a president who is not just saying, shoulder your burden, if NATO's important, show that you will invest in it, but who seems to take a personal joy in personally going after Prime Minister Trudeau or Prime Minister May or Angela Merkel, at the same time as cozying up to Vladimir Putin or celebrating his great achievement with Kim Jong-un, which they frankly still haven't even briefed us about 5 or 6 weeks later, what, if anything, was done. It's just... You can't undercut your alliances in a world like today and then say that makes you stronger. It makes you weaker.
Senator Tim Kaine, do you want to abolish ICE as some of your Democratic colleagues have suggested?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The problem with ICE is not ICE or ICE personnel. The problem with ICE is horrible policies. And if we don't like the policies, then we're not going to like the enforcement. So what I want to do is reform our immigration laws. So, John, my position's been pretty plain on this since June of 2013 in the Senate. We passed a comprehensive immigration reform bill that included a number of elements, but one of those elements was significantly greater investments in smart border security. That, protection for dreamers, help for employers figuring out the bona fides of people that they're hiring, path to citizenship for those who are willing to pay taxes and take criminal background checks and work for 12 or 13 years to earn that right. Comprehensive immigration reform is the right answer. We've got to have an immigration agency that does enforcement. We just got to get the policies right. So I say get the policies right, and then we're more likely to be happy with the enforcement. If you don't like something about the enforcement now, it's because we got to reform the policies.
I got to get you off in a minute. Are you going to sit down and meet with Justice Brett Kavanaugh?
Yes, I am. I'm sitting here in my office. I got a big notebook on my desk of the first volume of opinions that I'm reading in the next few days. And my practice on this, John, is having appointed justices to the Virginia Supreme Court, having argued cases before judges, having a wife who's a former judge. This is really, really serious. And so I do my own homework. I've got a lawyer on my staff, and we read opinions, and then I will always sit down and meet with a nominee to the Supreme Court. I can't do it with every court. I do it with judges in Virginia or a Supreme Court justice nominee. And then I wait and watch the Judiciary Committee hearing before I make a decision. I've got a series of questions that I know I'm going to be asking Judge Kavanaugh. But look, when Merrick Garland was nominated, the Republicans wouldn't even interview him. That was disrespectful. These nominees for an important position are entitled to be able to make their case individually to senators, and I look forward to that meeting. We don't have it scheduled yet, but it's going to happen sometime in the next few weeks.
Got to go, but quick final question. I'm in favor of your public option. I mean, this is one of the most sensible things I've ever seen. Basically, if you want to buy into Medicaid, you can buy into it. You pay the fee. I mean, have you got to Mitch McConnell with it? I mean, what would be the problem with even debating that?
Well, John, thank you. Yeah, our Medicare X thing, Michael Bennett and I, not only do we like it, but I think when we eventually have the discussion about what is the next step forward to add choice and bring down costs, you've got, Bernie Sanders, single payer on one side, you've got Lindsey Graham, Bill Cassidy, block grant everything back to the states on the other. But I think the proposal that we have on the table on Medicare X is going to get a lot of torque and traction because it just adds one element into the existing system and gives people an option that will be less expensive. Here's what we're being told. My committee, Health, Education, Labor, Pension, is a pretty good one because Lamar Alexander, Republican, Patty Murray, Democrat, have a pretty good track record of cutting deals. We got an opioid bill done a month or two back. We just rewrote the Career and Technical Education Act 2 weeks ago. What we're hearing is that after the election, we're going to take up all the ideas on the table and try to figure out which one is the best. We just had a great hearing on rising health care costs earlier in the week. We've had a series of them, and we're doing that to set up the discussion. So no, I haven't talked to Senator McConnell about it yet, but it starts in my committee, and our committee is having hearings on health care costs to kind of lay the groundwork for the discussion. I'm excited to talk not about the problem, but eventually get into, okay, the diagnosis is one thing, but what's the prescription?
Well, I thought Republicans want options and they want people to be able to make choices. And I think your public option, what you call, what's the title?
Medicare X. Medicare that you can buy on the exchange.
Yeah, Medicare that you can buy on the exchange. I mean, that should be an option. I don't know why Republicans isn't for that, where the White House isn't for that, because you want options, you want choices. There it is. If you don't like it, don't buy it. It's a very simple process.
And they're going to have to set a premium to cover the cost. So it wouldn't increase taxes, wouldn't increase the deficit, wouldn't touch the Medicare Trust Fund. So it's just the injection of an additional option for people if they want to pursue it.
We're out of time. More information, timkaine.com. timkaine.com, running for a second term Democratic Senator of Virginia, and that'll be decided on November 6th. More info, timkaine.com. Senator, thanks for being with us. I really
John,
appreciate
good to talk.
your
Thanks,
candor.
man.